Well, hello there, my fellow rushers. How are you doing today? King Rexy here. Today we're going to be starting off a mini-series. And these series are going to be mostly for beginner players. So if you're a veteran in the game like me, then this video is probably going to be of no value to you. But if you're new to the game and you're not sure what you're doing, this is probably going to help you out. So I'm going to be going through every Kingdom Rush game. I may go through our Marines as well later on, but for now we're going to keep it at Kingdom Rush and we're going to go through every single one of the enemies. Every single one of them, I'm gonna try to explain what they do, how you should deal with them, and of course their strengths and weaknesses. So, without wasting any more time, let's just get right into it. Goblins. Small, even humanoids with no outstanding abilities. I mean, do I need to describe them? They have 24 HP. By the way, I'm doing this on veteran difficulty, so if you want, because, you know, veterans, duh. Okay, so where was I? Oh yeah. Honestly, they're not really that much of a threat. You can kill them with pretty much anything. I would recommend artillery though, because they come in big hordes, so you may want some area damage. Orcs. Tough savages with light armor. Yeah, they're basically these guys, but beefier. They move slower, but they also have 96 HP with low armor, so physical damage is slightly less efficient against them. But I would say you can still kill them with physical damage, such as like Tier 2 or Tier 3 archer, or even an artillery, because they do come in packs, but they're not as tightly packed as the goblins, so they're slightly easy. They're a little bit harder to deal with, but not by all that much. They're like these guys, slightly improved. Shaman. Tribal healers resistant to magic attacks. So yeah, basically these guys heal nearby units, including themselves, every once in a while, and they have high magic resistance, so obviously you do not want to use magic damage against them. I would say the best way to deal with them is honestly to separate them away from the group, or because, I mean, you can try to burst them down, but the problem is that, again, they can just heal everything back up. So the best way to do it is to separate them away from the group with your reinforcements or hero and just take them down, because their damage is quite pathetic, 3 to 5. I'll be surprised if any hero in the game dies to a shaman from all champions. And yeah, try to not use too much magic, because obviously these guys have high magic resistance. But still, if you need to, you can get like 1 or 2 mages, but not anything more than that. The Orgs. The Ogres. Now these guys are basically the big old dudes. They're the first chunky enemy that you have to deal with. The thick ones, as I like to call them. Okay, I don't call them like that, I'm not that creepy, but still. Okay, so the big, ugly, and tough humanoids, they obliterate anything on their path. I mean, yeah, it shows. 960 HP, so almost 1000 HP, with 40 to 60 damage, and they cost 3 lives, so you don't want this thing getting close to your exit, because it's gonna be dangerous. Now, there are multiple ways to deal with them. You can perma-stall them if you have enough barracks at one spot, because you can keep on respawning and they can't kill them fast enough, because they don't do area damage. But still, they have 960 HP, so they're gonna take a while to die. I would say the best way to deal with them is magic damage, because it has the highest DPS out of any tower. But if you have a shaman accompanying an orc, I would say try to mix it up. Mix up some archers with mages, or mages with artillery, but always make sure to have at least one set of barracks to stall these guys out for as much as you can. Speaking of stalling, the next enemy is very anti-barrack friendly too. Bandit. Swift and agile. They can dispatch their enemies very quickly. Yeah, they can basically dodge melee attacks. That's kind of their funny thing. They dodge melee attacks, which is not fun because that makes your units kind of obsolete. They move fast, and they have, even though their HP is not that high, it's slightly lower than the orc, and they have no armor. But they're fast, and they do 20 to 30 damage, which is a lot of damage. So if you have a bunch of low tier barracks, they're gonna get shredded to pieces. So if you want a barracks against them, usually tier 3 is good enough for them, because your barracks are gonna have medium armor at this point, so you'll be able to resist their damage for long enough. Honestly, tier 3 artillery shreds these guys, so that's usually a pretty efficient way to deal with them. Or you can spam archers or mages. I would say archers are a little bit more efficient because of their consistent attack rate. With mages, they may get overwhelmed. But usually, that's how you deal with them. Brigand. Now, here are these guys. The first heavy armored enemy. Well, not really. They have medium armor, as you can see. They have 192 HP, so they're kind of tanky. with their medium armor. They only do 6 to 10 damage though, so it's about the same damage output as a tier 3 barracks. So if you have tier 3 barracks on your own, you should be able to match the power of these guys. But you're not gonna be able to kill them because they have slightly more health than a tier 3 barrack. So usually try to go for a couple mages around them. Artillery works fine against them, but I would say maybe like a couple mages. Maybe get like 2 mage towers and a barrack tower. That should be enough. If they're coming in like a big horde, then artillery may be the way to go, but for the most part, mages are their biggest counter. Marauder. Now this guy is quite a confusing enemy. He costs 3 lives, to put it at first, which I don't really see why he would cost 3 lives, but he is basically a brigand, but on steroids. 720 HP, so pretty significant improvement from 192. Medium armor still with medium movement speed, but the damage is higher and he costs triple the lives that a normal brigand would. So how do you deal with them? High tier mages, that's pretty much their counter. Just build high tier mages, usually tier 3 is good enough to deal with them. You can also go tier 4 if you're like into the post game, but tier 3 is usually enough to deal with them in the early game. And yeah, just try to stall them with reinforcements, your hero. Barracks work well against them. I won't recommend like low tier barrack, like tier 1 or 2. I would say tier 3 or 4 is gonna be good enough. Moving on, giant spider. They're basically like the pests of the game. There's a lot of them, they come in hordes. They are very squishy at only 72 HP, but they move fast. They have high magic resistance, which is kind of stupid because you don't want to use magic against them because they come in pretty big packs. Kind of like the goblins in a way. They're basically like speedy goblins with more HP. Their damage is pretty significant though, 10 to 18. I mean, comparing it to the brigand, these guys shred quite a bit. But usually their damage is not too threatening, just get a usually tier 2 or tier 3 artillery is good enough with some barracks to group them up. Spider Matriarch. Now this is basically the big mama Gertrude. She spawns spiderlings, which we're gonna see in a minute. They're honestly not that threatening. The spiderlings are basically like one-shotable by almost any tier 2 tower or above, so yeah, they're not that much of a threat, but if you don't stall this spider, she's just gonna keep on spawning, and she is kind of tough. 300 HP with high magic resistance and 15 to 25 damage on the average attack rate. It's pretty hard to beat. But usually if you just spam reinforcements at her and you just keep stalling her, she's not gonna be able to summon these little spiders. So try to stall her out for as long as you can and shred her down with physical damage, because obviously high magic resistance. Gargoyle. They're pretty much the beginner bot flying enemies. They have 188. They have 108 HP, which may seem a little bad, but honestly, as long as you have some tier 3 archers, maybe like a tier 3 mage or a Tesla coil, if you're like late into the game, then they're pretty much not a problem. Just make sure you don't spam barracks a lot, because obviously these guys are gonna fly right by them. Unless you have barbarians, but barbarians are not quite the best way to deal with them. They're pretty expensive, and yeah, they're not an efficient way to deal with them. Shadow archers, we love these enemies. They're basically like the ranged units. They do between 10 to 20 damage on pretty fast attack rates, so they're known for shredding barracks. They have 216 HP with low magic resistance. Even though they have low magic resistance, you can still go magic against them. They're gonna die slightly slower than if you would use something like an archer. Honestly, high tier archers are pretty efficient into them. And if you have like high tier barracks like the Holy Order with heal, you should be able to tank their damage, but any barrack below like tier 4 is gonna get shredded by these guys very quickly. So try to get some artillery with like Rat of the Forest. It's a pretty efficient way to counter them. The Dark Knights. Now these are like the tough boys, because they have high HP with 300 high armor with 360 HP. So they are pretty tough to deal with. They have 70% armor, by the way, so don't try to use physical damage against these guys. It's a pain. I've played the Citadel on Veteran with only barracks, and let me tell you, it's not fun. It's not fun when you have swarms of these guys coming your way. Artillery is not quite the best idea this time, because even though these guys have medium armor, it's only like 40%, so artillery is still good because it ignores half of it, but with these guys, I will not recommend it. try to go for like high tier mage towers against them, as well as some minor barracks, such as tier 2 or 3 to keep them up for just a little bit. Okay, the Woofies. They're basically very fast, vicious creatures that can dodge melee attacks. So they're like the bandits, but less threatening, because one, they have less HP, their damage is insignificant, and they have I mean, the only problem is that they come in swarms, alright? So another enemy that you can just delete with tier 2 artillery or higher. The Wargs. They're basically like the bigger puppies. They have more HP, somewhat significant damage, but they also have medium magic resistance, so usually, artillery also works good against them, but you're gonna need a little bit of a higher tier, something like tier 3 or 4. Rat of the Forest is also very efficient into them, so try to get that. As far as blocking them goes, you can do it, but I would not recommend it. I think you should just burst them down. Okay, now we have this thing, the golem heads. These are basically the things that get spawned from the first boss of the game, the Juggernaut. Honestly, even though his health may seem threatening at 12,000 with like 150 to 250 area damage, he's pretty slow. You can pretty much stall him infinitely with your hero if you just micro properly. Rain of Fire him every time you can and just try to dish out as much damage to him as possible. That's pretty simple. He has no armor nor magic resistance, so any damage works. I would say the best way to deal with him is Arcane Wizards, because they have the highest damage output in the game, at least in the original Kingdom Rush. As for the Golem heads, tier 3 artillery is usually pretty good into them. You can also go Rat of the Forest, but at one point he just starts spawning so many of them that Rat of the Forest just gets overwhelmed, so tier 3 artillery is a little bit of a safer way to go. Moving on, the Winter Wolves. Now these guys are the chunky doggos, because look at that, 420 HP, nice, we got the lit number, 20 to 40 damage, so their damage output is pretty high for an enemy that you're gonna be seeing quite often, and you have medium magic resistance. So imagine wargs if they were in Russia. That's basically what these guys are. Sorry if it sounded a little racist, I'm trying to make a little bit of a light humor here. So yeah, honestly, pretty annoying enemy to deal with. Archers are kinda their best counter. Rat of the Forest is pretty good. Shrapnel Shot also works, but the problem is that you kinda have to group them up, otherwise the Shrapnel Shot is gonna take like 2 out of 10. So yeah, try to combine it. Usually with barracks artillery or barracks with Rat of the Forest is a pretty efficient counter. Just don't go magic against them. Trolls. Now these guys are basically your new generic enemy you're gonna be seeing for the second half of the game. They're pretty darn annoying. They have 336 HP with 20 to 40 damage, so again, they're pretty difficult to stall with like low tier barracks, if nearly impossible. And they also regenerate their health. But the good thing is that they have no armor nor magic resistance, so try to do as much damage as you can to them. I would not recommend, pretty much anything works. You can go for like high tier archer, mage, or even artillery. Artillery is not quite the best into them until you unlock like Big Bertha. Big Bertha and Tesla Coil shred these guys, but even though their damage is pretty high, you still may have to go for at least a barrack or two up to like tier 3, because they're coming in swarms, so you kind of want to keep them nice and tight for the artillery to destroy them. Or you can just go archers everywhere and hope that they die, but I will not recommend that strategy. Troll Champions. They're basically very annoying. 720 HP, 30 to 50 damage, which don't trust this number, it's false. It's way higher than this. I don't remember the number, but it was much higher. And yeah, these guys have a long-range attacks that also do true damage. Yes, you heard me right, true damage. So getting a Holy Order with high armor is basically the stupidest thing that you can do against these guys, because they're gonna annihilate it. They're gonna shred through your armor no matter what. So how do you deal with them? Well, you can stall them out with your hero and try to separate them away from the main horde. You can use Rain of Fire on them to spawn kill them once they group up. Or you can just go for consistent damage. Honestly, consistent damage is the best way to deal with the trolls, because it kind of counters their regeneration. So going for something like high tier archer is pretty efficient into them. That's pretty much the best way to go. Artillery is not going to be as efficient. Mages are good, but once they start coming in swarms, the mages kind of usually fall off because they don't have any good area damage. So yeah, archers are their best counter. Troll Chieftain. Yikes, now this guy is quite a pain to deal with. Basically, he also has a regen, but look at that. 1440 HP, so he has a ka-chunk amount of health. 10 to 30 damage, so his damage is not as high as like these two, but he still has some damage output. He has no resistances, but he costs 6 lives. Why he costs 6 lives? Skyronhide. I don't know who was behind this decision, but it is stupid. And yeah, basically they can encourage other trolls. And if you don't know what it does, well, it's basically like a massive steroid. It gives them a bonus damage, a ton of movement speed, and on top of that, they also get medium armor, because why not? So yeah, the best way to deal with this guy is to spawn kill him on spawn with a rain of fire. You can also use insta kills on him, or you can try to separate him away from the group, but if he is coming up with troll champions, your best bet is to just spawn kill him, because these guys are not gonna allow you to stall at all. Yeti, the big chunky dudes, they're basically like the orcs. The only difference is that they're much harder, because they do between 50 to 150 area damage, so you don't want to stack up a lot of barracks against them because they're gonna two-shot them. They have 2400 HP, but they have no resistances, so any damage works against them. I would say the best way to deal with them is usually with a musketeer garrison with shrapnel shot, or any sort of insta kill against them works. They don't come in too many in large groups, they usually come pretty spaced out, so you can usually insta kill them pretty easily. That's pretty much the best way to deal with them. Or you can group them up for a big rain of fire shot. Rocket Riders. Now, these guys are probably the most annoying flag enemy in the game. 408 HP, which is a lot. They're fast, and they also get this turbo boost. Basically, whenever you hit them, they get a nice burst of movement speed for a bit. It's only like a one-time thing, I believe. No, I think it occurs multiple times depending on how long the level is, but basically, the best way to deal with them is to get reinforcements with spears at the front, shoot at them, make them waste their turbo chargers, so that way they can get into your choke point, and then just watch them die. It's as simple as that. They're not too difficult to deal with as long as you know how to counter them. Moving on to the Dark Slayer. Look at this guy, 1440 HP with 24 to 76 physical damage, which is a pretty interesting number. He can do a very little or a very high amount of damage, so you don't want to take chances against this dude, because look at that. Great armor. That's basically 90% armor. So if you hit him with a physical damage attack that deals like 50 damage, he's gonna take only 5 damage. Whatever you do not use physical damage against this guy. Let's just make it clear. The best way to deal with him is usually sorcerer mages, because you can reduce his armor pretty fast. And once he loses his armor, he's just a big health bar, so you can just shred him with anything. Try to stall him out with elementals. Elementals are pretty good at stalling Dark Slayers. And just watch him melt. Just keep an eye out whenever he occurs, so you can react in time. JT, the second boss of the game. Honestly, he is, if anything, easier than the first one, because even though he has higher HP, and even though he has attack damage numbers, he actually insta-kills your units, so yeah. But what they don't tell you is you can micro. If you use your hero and just micro around him whenever he tries to auto-attack you, you just go sideways and he pretty much stays there like a fool and does nothing. The best way to kill him fast is with 3 arcane wizards. They're pretty efficient at killing him, and and the rest is just hero micro your way around him, and whenever he freezes towers, just spam click like that, just spam, you know. Okay, moving on to the third area of the game, demon spawns. These dudes, 300 HP, 10 to 30 damage, medium armor, medium magic resistance, and they have infernal combustion explosions that do true damage. Yes, it is true damage, so no matter what unit you have, they're gonna lose a lot of HP. So stalling them is not a very efficient choice. You may have to stall them sometimes though, so I would say the best way to survive a demon spawn explosion is with a holy order combined with the heal. That's pretty much the best way to survive against them. But in general, Tesla Coil melts them, so go Tesla Coil or Rat of the Forest. These are their 2 biggest counters. Demon Lord. This dude is not as bad as the Troll Chieftain. He basically shields other demons. Basically, yeah, they get extra health, pretty much, and you have to remove the shield before you can damage them. The only problem is that, unlike the Troll Chieftain, which I forgot to mention, you can remove his ability to enrage allies by just stalling him. This dude doesn't care. You can keep him occupied and he's still gonna be giving shoes to everyone. So yeah, he is pretty annoying. Try to separate him away from the big horde as soon as possible. Or if that's not possible, try to spawn kill them. If there's multiple demon lords coming up, use reinforcements and your hero to group them up and spawn kill them. That's usually the best way to deal with them. The sooner you delete them, the easier the game becomes. Demon Hounds. Now these guys are not too... They're pretty much a they're pretty much a carbon copy of the Winter Wolf, so their stats are exactly the same. The only difference is that they also have an Infernal Combustion, so low. Different enemies, right? Variety. Anyway, honestly, you pretty much deal with them the same way that you would with the Winter Wolf. You just have to be careful with your barracks because they have Infernal Combustion, so whenever you see one of them nearly dying, and it's about to die in like 2 seconds, you may want to move your barracks a little bit, because if you move them, they don't take any damage. So here's a nice tip for you. Demon Imp. Just I was talking about recycled enemy design. Do you think that this is funny? It's not. Yeah, basically they are gargoyles, but with a lot more HP. So try to focus on using mages or archers to take them down. Tesla Coil is also an efficient way to deal with them, but in the beginning they don't really come in packs. They start coming in much more hordes when you get to these 2 levels right there, so Tesla Coil is gonna be very efficient right in these areas. Okay, now Skeleton. Skeleton. Pretty easy, honestly. 144 HP, 10 to 20 damage, no armor. And they're not too threatening. They come in big hordes though, so Big Bertha is your best friend. Tesla Coil also works against them, but I would say Big Bertha is better because of the next enemy. Skeleton Knights, which also accompany the regular skeletons. They're much beefier though, 480 HP, low armor, and 20 to 40 damage. So the only reason why Big Bertha is better is because Big Bertha can hit infinite amount of enemies, meanwhile the Tesla Coil can hit only like up to 5 enemies with its basic attack. You also have the electric field around it, but it doesn't do all that much damage. Sure, it's gonna be very efficient into regular skeletons, but against Skeleton Knights, it's gonna take quite longer to beat them. So Big Bertha, I would say, is the best way to deal with these 2 types of enemies. And here's the guy who spawns them, Necromancer. 840 HP, 20 to 40 damage on hit, and he got 3 lives. Pretty mech enemy. He's just an annoying spammer who just spawns enemies and does nothing else. His damage is kinda high at 20 to 40, but they're not too bad to deal with. I would say spawn killing them is the best way to deal with them, kinda like Demon Lord, because the longer they stay on the field, the bigger of a problem they're gonna become, so the sooner you kill them, the better. Moving on to these guys, the Magma Elemental. Now these guys are pretty chunky, 3000 HP, 50 to 150 damage, and they also do area damage, kinda like the Yeti, and they cost 5 lives. So how do you beat them? Insta-kills. It's as simple as that. Go for something like Polymorph, Death Ray, or even the Musketeer's Sniper Shot, but I would not recommend the Sniper Shot because it's kind of RNG. You only have 60% chance to get that juicy headshot, so try to go for more consistent insta-kills. And honestly, even though they do high damage, they're not too terribly hard to stall. You can just micro around them with your hero, or just get a high tier Paladin Holy Order to block them. So also some of the elementals are also pretty good at dealing with them from the Sorcerer Mage. Moving on to the third boss of the game, we have Veznan. Honestly, kinda meh. Not really much to say about him. He does area damage, so he is pretty hard to block, but he moves so slowly that you can just micro your way around him. He's not much to say other than micro around them with your hero and get something like an Arcane Wizard or a Shrapnel or a Musketeer Garrison with high tier Shrapnel Shot and burst them down. That's pretty much how you deal with him. Now here's his second form, if I can find it. Wait, does it not show the secondary form? Bruh. Okay, that's something that I didn't notice. Why are they not showing his secondary form? Now that's sus. So yeah, he does have a second form after you delete all of this HP. He has second form, and it's basically a big demon who also walks slowly across the path, but whenever he hits you, he insta-kills anything on his path, so... The good thing is that he has very, very slow animation, so whenever you see that he goes something like this, You wanna move your hero to the side, let him do his fire breath, and then come back to him and stall him. And you can pretty much keep him at one spot for an eternity and slowly kill him. Veslan is kind of a hard boss because of the wave composition around him, but once you get to the demon form, he is pretty much pathetic. Moving on to the other enemies. Goblin Zapper. Now, I'm not sure why they're called Zapper. They're called Zapper when you... Like, in Kingdom Rush Vengeance, they're called Zapper when you get to the Goblin War Zeppelin, so I'm not sure why they changed it, but whatever. They're basically like mobile artillery. That's basically the simplest way to explain them. They are not very durable though, only at 168 HP with no armor, or any resistance for that matter. But they're fast, so if you get a big pile of them near your choke point, your units are gonna die, because they do area damage, so they ignore 50% armor. So try to group them up and use artillery to kill them, or shrapnel shot, or even summon elemental, but I wouldn't recommend summon elemental into them. It's like a last resort type of defense method. Usually just group them up and use Tesla Coil or Big Bertha. Moving on, Orc Champion now. These dudes are quite annoying. 480 health, 20 to 40 damage, and high armor. And they're gonna be coming up a lot once you get to the Ruins of Akaroth. That's where they appear. They can come in pretty decent swarms. But honestly, the best way to deal with them is with a Sorcerer Mage and a Tesla Coil. That's pretty efficient to deal with them because you can reduce their armor and also slow them, while the Tesla Coil is gonna melt through them faster because they're gonna have less resistance. And honestly, for stalling, you can stall them, it's fine. But I would say just spam your reinforcements for the most part. Once they get to like really big swarms, that's when you want to go for barracks. I would not recommend barbarians into them. Barbarians are pretty trash against these guys, so try to go for something like Holy Order. Warg Rider. Now these are basically these guys on wolves. They have pretty much the same stats. The only difference is that they cost 2 lives, they are fast, and they have high magic resistance. So, and whenever you kill them, one of these guys appears. So how do you deal with them? Honestly, the best way to deal with a situation like that, where you get an enemy who has high magic resistance and then high armor, is honestly Shrapnel Shot. Get a high tier Shrapnel Shot, get some barracks, try to use your reinforcements and your hero, try to group them up as tightly as humanly possible, and then wait for the Shrapnel Shot to just ka-chunk them. It's gonna delete them pretty much every time as long as you get it above tier 2. Tier 2 or tier 3 should be enough to nuke them. And then once you get to these guys, you know, just use Sorcerer Mage just to reduce their armor and make them pretty much nothing. Forest Troll. Now this dude is begging to be insta-killed. I mean, look at that. 4800 HP, that's insane. 50 to 150 damage and 5 lives. He also has regeneration. And when they say he has regeneration, he has a crap load of regeneration. So yeah, not much to say about this guy other than insta-kill him. Try to insta-kill him. And if he's coming up with the swarm, rather try to get him ahead of the pack by killing the rest of the smaller units with artillery tower. Or try to like isolate him, but it's pretty hard to isolate him because of his area damage thingy. So yeah, insta-kills are pretty much the best way to deal with him. There's no really other good way to kill him. Okay, now here is Gultak, the first boss from the post game. He is probably one of the most pathetic ones, to be honest. He has a good amount of HP though, 14,440, with 200 to 600 physical damage. The thing is that his damage is single target, he doesn't do area damage. His specialty though is that he can heal nearby allies, and his healing has pretty darn long range, so yeah. The boss himself is not that hard, it's the wave that comes with him. I would say whenever you get to the boss wave with Gultak, try to kill the enemies that come from the wave, and then focus on Gultak. Because even if he dies, the enemies are still gonna be coming, so try to stall him out with like barracks. Even though he does kinda high damage, Holy Order with maxed out healing should be enough to stall him for quite a while. And yeah, other than that, use any type of damage you can, because he has no resistances. Let's see, what do we have here? Oh yeah. Moving on to the Husk. The Husks are probably they're kind of a weird things, because they have 300 HP, but they also have medium armor with 5 to 15 damage. So they're kind of like the brigands if they were tankier. The only thing is that they can spawn naturally, but if you're playing on the swamp levels like here and here, the moment one of your units dies, a husk will spawn from these swamps. So yeah, they're kind of annoying. I would say artillery is still pretty good into them, even though they have medium armor. Tesla Coil just destroys these things. Maybe get the Sorcerer Mage to support it, but honestly, 1 or 2 Teslas are more than enough to shred through the husks. They're not too bad of a unit to deal with. Noxious Creeper. Yeah, these things. 1200 HP, 20 to 40 damage, cost 3 lives, and they have a new magic resistance. And it's called Mutated Spiderlings. And the Mutated Spiderlings are basically regular Spiderlings, but they're tankier. And obviously this guy is much tankier. I mean, comparing him to the Matriarch, it only has 300 HP. This dude over there, 1200. That's like 4 times the amount. So yeah, insta-kills do work against them, but later on, once you start encountering them later into the level, they're gonna start coming in swarms as you progress. So usually artillery is pretty good into them, because you can just delete the Spiderlings and then block her, stall her out with you know, reinforcements, hero, whatever you have. And yeah, that's pretty much how you be there. Not too difficult of an enemy as long as you don't let it loose for too long. Tainted Treant. Now, these guys are very annoying. Look at that, 1200 HP, high armor, 20 to 40 damage. And the thing is that they get spawned mostly up in here. The thing is that on this level, let me just see the name because I forgot. Rotten Forest. On the Rotten Forest, they spawn at random intervals, so you never know when they're gonna pop out. And once they do, you better be prepared. Honestly, the best way to deal with them is usually get a barrack tower, get an artillery, high tier, preferably Tesla, and a couple sorcerers to reduce their armor. Because even though they come in swarms, they don't come as tight of a swarms as like goblin or wolves or giant spiders, for example. They come in swarms, but they're not like that big of a group. Usually they come in a group like of 3 or 5, something like that. So don't be too terrified of these guys. They may be scary once you encounter them at first, but once you get higher tier defenses, they become easier to deal with every time. And if the situation gets too tight, you can always use your Rain of Fire, of course. Swamp Thing, another target that's very easy to deal with. 3600 HP, 4200 damage. They have ranged attack. They also have regeneration similar to the Forest Troll, so they're insanely difficult to kill. And they also, yeah, they have ranged attack, and their ranged attack deals area damage, just like their melee attacks. So yeah, these guys are pretty hard to stall. They're very hard to kill with regular damage. Honestly, insta-kills are the best way to deal with them. There's no other way to really beat them. I mean, you can, but it takes like a short eternity, so why bother? Unless you want to be doing some challenges like me and other YouTubers, just go for the insta-kill, man. It's gonna save you so much time. And also a quick tip: if you're doing this level right here, and if you're doing like these 2 levels, do not go for Summon Elemental, because if a Summon Elemental dies, this thing is gonna spawn from one of the nearby swamps. So yeah, try to not use elementals on these 2 levels, unless you want to hate your life after. Now moving on to this boss, Green Buck. Honestly, the boss itself is pretty easy. He does have a global attack where he attacks every single one of your units every like 10 seconds or so. So it is pretty hard to block him. But as long as you have good hero micro, you should be able to stall him in place. The problem is that you gotta kill this guy quick, because there's gonna be treants spawning everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. So the faster you kill this guy, the faster you're going to be to win the level. But keep in mind that these guys are going to be constantly spawning, so sometimes it may be better to preserve the Rain of Fire. Sometimes, that is. Okay, moving on. This guy, Raider. Ugh, now these enemies are quite a pain in the butt to deal with. Probably one of the worst in the game. 1200 HP, 42 AD, attack damage, and great armor, so 90% armor with this. They're basically Dark Slayers with ranged attack that deals. Even though it says magic damage, it is true damage, so don't be fooled by this stupid description. The good thing about them is that if you stall them, their attack rate is probably one of the worst in the game. They attack once every 3 seconds, or 2.5 seconds, I don't remember, but it was somewhere around there. So stalling them is an option, but it's not the best one, because they usually come in with a lot of other enemies, so The best way to deal with them is get a sorcerer mage with a artillery tower or Wrath of the Forest to stall them out. That's pretty much the best way to deal with them. Try to reduce their armor and, you know, do your best to avoid their ranged attacks. Pillager. This guy is just a big chunkster. 360 HP though, so yeah, he do be chunky. Well, he doesn't have more HP than the Force Troll because he is the thickest boy of them all, but still, he is chunky in his own way. 50 to 100 damage and high magic resistance with area damage. So yeah, another target that you should insta-kill, obviously. Just, a lot of targets are similar, like Forest Troll, Yeti, what else? Magma Elemental. Those type of targets, just go for an insta-kill. It's by far the best way to deal with them. Now this boss, Kingpin. Now he is probably one of the more unique bosses in the game, because you can't stall him by any way, shape or form, and if you stay near him, he deals damage over time, and it's a lot, 100 damage per second or so. So yeah, try to not stall this guy, just don't keep units near him, alright? That's pretty much all I'm gonna say. Honestly, he is not too difficult to beat, but he does have quite a few unique abilities. The first one is that he heals. Whenever you damage him, after he drops below a certain amount of HP, he starts healing periodically. And he heals like 500 HP every time, so try to do more than 500 damage to him in between heals and you should be able to kill him. The other thing is that if you have a lot of gold, he's gonna steal some of it from you, so keep that in mind. But yeah, he's unique boss, that's for sure, but he's not the most threatening one. He only has 9600 health, so yeah, you can burst him down pretty easily. When he gets like halfway through the map, he should be dead. Troll pathfinders. Now these dudes are quite annoying. There's gonna be these slides that you see on these two levels right here. So yeah, basically these guys are gonna slide down on them. You're not gonna be able to block them, and they're gonna be very fast. So whatever you do, you don't want to get them to the slides, because they're gonna be unblockable. They also regenerate just like any other troll, but they're basically like much harder trolls because they have more HP and their damage is pretty high, 30 to 70. Usually stalling them is pretty hard, but you kind of have to stall them. It's rather try to stall them out and kill them slowly, or try to kill them before they even get to the ice. So that's usually the best way. Just kill them before they get to the ice. And for stalling, you don't really need barrack. You can just use reinforcements, or I mean, if it's really needed, you can go for a barrack tower up to like tier 3 or 4, but for the most part, just getting like an artillery tower or 2 should be enough to dispose of these guys pretty fast. Trollbreaker. Now this dude is pretty tanky. 30,000, 360 HP. Repetitive HP. His damage is pretty high though, 95 to 165. He has regeneration, just like this dude right here and the Swamp Thing. However, he does have medium armor, and he's pretty tough to kill. So how do you deal with this guy? Obviously, insta-kills. You can take him down naturally if you have enough damage output, but usually insta-kills are the best way to go. And stalling him, I will not recommend it because he deals area damage. So yeah, even though it doesn't say it right here, he does deal area damage. So yeah, he's pretty difficult to stall. Just insta-kill him as soon as you can. Moving on to the next boss fight. Olokai or Olokai, whatever the name of this dude was. The big elephant troll looking thingamajig. So this guy, would you look at that, 12,000 HP, so his HP is not that high. His damage is fine at the 350 area damage, and he's slow. The only unique thing about him is that whenever he has his shield up, you basically do 0 damage to him. He's immune to any damage. So you have to keep him stalled for the entire duration of the fight, otherwise he's gonna get it under his shield and start regenerating slowly. So you want to try to stall him out by separating your units a little bit. Usually 2 sets of Holy Orders maxed out with a Summon Elemental should be enough to stall him out forever, basically, as long as you have some good micro. And yeah, just try to kill him because he has no resistances. So there's no like specific damage type that you need to build or anything. Okay, moving on to these dudes. The Demon Legion. What a terrifying enemy. So yeah, they have 799 HP. I wonder why they don't have 800, but okay. 10 to 30 damage, so their damage output is meh at most. It's not high, it's not low, it's kind of like okay-ish. But they do have high armor, so using physical damage against them is not the greatest idea. They also duplicate, so if you leave these guys alive for long enough, they can duplicate. But they don't duplicate infinitely. I think they can spawn in like 4, maybe 5 replicas of themselves, if I remember correctly. So yeah, but you probably don't wanna let them do that. Basically, the best way to deal with them is usually trying to spawn kill them, or if there's too many of them, just go for some artillery with Rat of the Forest and a sorcerer mage somewhere in between to reduce their armor, and they should die off eventually. You can stall them out pretty easily because they don't really do that much damage, but they do have infernal combustion, so keep that in mind. However, stalling is gonna be a terrible idea against these dudes, the Flareon. They have ranged attacks and they also have infernal combustion. They have 300 HP and they do 15 to 25 damage, and they're fast. Even though the damage number may not seem that high, the balls that they fire burn your allies, and the burn does stupidly high amount of damage, and it's true damage, so no matter what barrack type you have, they're gonna get melted. All it takes is like 2 shots from a Flareon to destroy your barrack. So yeah, these guys are annoying. Just go for Rat of the Forest. Usually it's a very efficient counter, or a Tesla Coil / Big Bertha. By far the best way to deal with these guys. And whatever you do, don't go for too many barracks, because they are gonna melt through them. Speaking of barracks, Gualamon, or Gualamon as I used to call them. They're basically like the fat chunky dudes from McDonald's. That's who they are. 3000 HP, 40 to 80 damage, medium magic resistance. They have infernal combustion, and they also can fly, so if you try to stall them initially, they're just gonna say screw you and just fly over your units and travel a short distance before they land. So you don't want to stall them right away. You wanna, if you have a level where you see this type of enemy, just keep your units as far to the back as possible, because once they get past a certain point in the map, they can't really fly. They can use their flying ability, so you can just stall them out there and kill them slowly. Honestly, insta-kills are pretty efficient into them, but you can also kill them using other methods such as shrapnel shot, or just a lot of damage from the Tesla Coil. Moving on, Cerebrus. Pretty much the only mini-boss in the game. And yeah, he is quite challenging, I would say, when you're fighting him for the first time. He has 7200 HP, 70 to 90 damage, and high armor. So yeah, he may seem hard to beat initially, but honestly, he is not that bad. You may think that the fast movement speed is something that you should be worried about, but nah. The best way to deal with him is you want to get a sorcerer mage with an elemental, and you want to keep the elemental tier 1. Whenever the elemental is getting close to dying, I would say if he falls below something like 100 HP, you upgrade him. And once he gets upgraded, he gets his health back to full. So you do that multiple times, and by the time you get to tier 3 elemental, the Cerebrus is gonna have 0 armor because the sorcerer mage is gonna remove it completely, or he's gonna have like barely any armor. So that's when you wanna Rain of Fire him, because the scorched ground deals physical damage. So you wanna use the Rain of Fire when this guy has low armor or 0 armor, and that's pretty much how you beat him. You just need to have like a little bit of gold saved up before you face off a Cerebrus, otherwise you may be screwed. Moving on, Moloch. Honestly, pretty underwhelming boss. The boss wave is fine, but the boss himself is pretty meh. He has 13,333 HP, what a fitting number. 80 to 120 damage, area damage might I add, but the thing about him is that if you have more than one unit stalling him or being in close proximity to him, he's just gonna do a big head slam and insta-kill any unit in range. Which is pretty annoying, so I would not recommend you to stall him with more than one unit at a time. I would say just micromanage your hero and just move around the boss so that way he can't really hit you. And you can pretty much kill him very fast. I would say get the sorcerer with like 2 musketeer garrison with shrapnel shot, and you should be able to destroy this guy within mere seconds. Moving on, Rushroom, probably one of the most hated enemies in the game. You only see them on one level, which is this one right here. But the problem is that they are also super duper annoying. They only have 600 HP with 12 to 18 damage, but they come in big packs. They're a pretty swarmy enemy. And they also have poisonous spores. Basically, whenever they die, they explode, and they do poison damage to your units over time. And poison is basically true damage, so you can't really avoid that. Honestly, Tesla Coil is the best way to deal with them. I know it's kind of generic at this point, but Tesla Coil just melts these guys. If you need stalling power, I would say go for something like Holy Order with maximum heal. You don't really need the armor bonus. I would say go for the Holy Strike. It's kind of nice because you can clean up a lot of them if they're on like a low HP. If the situation requires it, you can get it. But for the most part, Tesla Coil, Rat of the Forest. If you don't want to use barracks, Rat of the Forest is a good alternative to stalling them. But keep in mind that Rat of the Forest only can affect 6 enemies at a time, so if there's like 20 of them, obviously Rat of the Forest ain't saving you there. So be careful as to how many there are on your choke point, and whenever the situation gets too tight, Rain of Fire them. Here's the boss. Myconid. Whatever this shroom's name is. Basically, he's a big shroom, that's all you need to know. He's probably the most underwhelming boss fight in the game. Capping at only 5400 HP on veteran difficulty. Bruh. 150 to 350 damage. He doesn't even do area damage, he's just single target based. So you can pretty much kill him in like one Rain of Fire if you time it properly. And the thing is that after he dies, he spawns like a bunch of shrooms. A bunch of the rushrooms. I think it spawns somewhere around 10 to 20 of them, so whenever he dies, just don't get jebaited thinking that the level is over, because there's a lot of mushrooms coming up from this guy, and you don't want to die like that. It will be very embarrassing. Moving on to the next thing. We have zombies. Pretty generic enemy, not too threatening. 360 HP, 5 to 15 damage with no resistance and slow speed. Artillery. What can I say? Artillery is the best way to deal with these guys. Usually high tier, something like tier 4, because they have a sizable amount of health. The only problem is that they're very, very swarmy, so keep that in mind. Speaking of a swarmy enemy, Giant Rat. Now, these guys are pretty easy to deal with. Tesla Coil is pretty much the vein of their existence. Just get a Tesla Coil with a static field all the way up, and they should die in one shot. They have 120 HP, 8 to 12 damage, but that's not what the threat is. They spread deadly disease, may spawn from trash. Now, the trash part is basically they can spawn from random locations on the map. Well, they're not random, they're actually showed, but you're gonna find out once you get to these levels. But yeah, they are not too bad to deal with. You just don't want to stall them at all, because the poison is basically very, very dangerous, and it deals a lot of true damage over time. Speaking of rats, we have the Were-Rat, who also spreads the deadly disease, but he's pretty darn annoying. He's fast, he has 540 HP, 25 to 35 damage, which it doesn't really matter when the poison kills you, not his base attacks, and he has low armor. Honestly, artillery works pretty well into him too, but I would recommend getting something like Rat of the Forest to keep him in place for an additional auto attack from the artillery, because these guys are kinda tanky in a way. Not super tanky, but still tanky. Moving on, we have Fallen Knights. These dudes are quite annoying. Inst kills don't really work well into them because, as you can see here, they resurrect as Undead. And these are the Undead, basically, the Spectral Knight. So, do you see a pattern here? Let's investigate this enemy. He has a good amount of HP, good damage, and high armor. These dudes have high magic resistance and the same HP. And if you kill them, this guy spawns. Now look at this. 1200 HP with high magic resistance, and when you kill them, you get this thing. Do you see a familiar pattern here, guys? Because I do. Anyway. So these guys are not the worst thing in the world to deal with, honestly. Just shrapnel shot is really good into them. Shrapnel shot is by far the best way to annihilate these dudes. Also reinforcements with spears. If you manage to stack like 2 sets of reinforcements or even 3, these guys are gonna just get ka-chunked. The problem is that after they die, they turn into this thing, which has deadly aura around it. Basically, it deals it deals damage around itself. So you don't wanna stall this guy for very long, because there's no point, because he's immune to physical damage. So after you kill something that has high magic resistance, you get something that is immune to physical damage. So you kill this with... Basically, if you see a fallen knight, or you don't want to go all physical damage, you want to go magic. The good thing is that these dudes don't have a lot of HP, only 480. It's not like little, but it's not like but it's not like high amount. I would say it's somewhere around average-ish. So yeah, the best way to deal with them is, as I said, shrapnel shot and some reinforcements for these guys, and once they turn into spectral knights, usually tier 3 mages or tier 3 to tier 4 mages are pretty good into them. Poison arrows also work, but I won't really recommend it. It's a pretty expensive and not very efficient method. So going for something like Arcane Wizard or even Sorcerer is very good. That's pretty much how you beat them. Abomination. Oh wait, I forgot to mention. They're immune to physical damage, so the Sorcerer attacks do not reduce the amount of physical damage they take. They're just immune flat. That's it. Just as an FYI. Anyway, where was I? Abomination, yeah. Now these dudes are basically the big chunksters. 3000 HP, 35 to 45 damage, low armor, slow speed, but they also explode on that, and their explosion is quite deadly because it deals true damage. So if one of these things dies near your choke point, most variants are probably gonna just die instantly. The best way to deal with this thing, honestly, you can rather insta-kill it or stall it out, because unlike the Forest Troll, the Swamp Thing, Trollbreaker, these guys have pretty meh damage output, 35 to 45. As long as you have high enough tier barracks with your hero nearby, you should be able to stall this thing forever, pretty much. Just make sure to move your hero out of the way when it's about to die, though. Black Hag, these guys. They're basically flying enemies that take unique paths, so they're not gonna go to your regular path. They're gonna go like to the sides and move all weirdly. They have high magic resistance, and they have 720 HP with 40 to 60 magic damage. And the annoying thing is that they also transform your units into tadpoles. So any unit that's not your hero is gonna get instantly killed. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. And they have very, very long range. They're annoying. Let's just leave it at that. They're annoying. The best way to deal with them, usually anything that's not a magic tower. High tier archer or a Tesla coil is usually good enough. You can also stall them out for quite a while if you just micromanage your hero. If your barracks are like all the way in the back and your hero is like here and a black hag is here, if it's about to shoot you, just move slightly to the side and boom, avoid the shot. And you keep repeating this process over and over and over again until they eventually die. It's a pretty... they're quite a tedious enemy to deal with, but as long as you know how to micro your way around them, they're actually not that bad. Werewolves. Now, these guys are quite annoying. 840 HP, 40 to 60 damage, and low magic resistance. They're fast, and they also regenerate their health. So yeah, hard units to block that also come in swarms every now and then. So how do you deal with them? Well, high tier artillery is efficient into them, but I would say one of the best ways to deal with them is usually with Ranger's Hideout. Get a lot of rats of the forest, and I would say barbarians are not terrible into these guys because the paladins, they just don't do enough damage to the point where they actually hurt the werewolves. So going for barbarians is actually pretty efficient into the werewolves. You can deal a little damage to them. The only negative is that you're not going to be able to block them for that much, but you don't want to keep these guys stalled out for too long because eventually they're just going to regenerate their health all the way. So try to keep on damaging them, let them get to your choke point, and keep them in there until they die, and just barrage them with damage. Lycan. Now these guys are not too bad. They have a human form, which is pretty squishy, only at 480 HP, but whenever they get below a certain amount of HP, they shift into this werewolf. And this guy is quite tough. He has 1200 HP with pretty high damage output and I think high magic resistance, if I remember correctly. So the best way to deal with them is usually insta-kills. They're not terrible. There's also a glitch, by the way. If you stun a lycan with like the rat of the forest and you use an insta-kill on him, he's not gonna transform into this thing. However, if you insta-kill him without him being stunned, he's gonna still transform, which is pretty stupid mechanic, but I just wanted to point it out. honestly, not too bad of a unit. You don't see this guy very often, but whenever you see them, rather just make sure you have a good amount of physical damage, because these guys don't take a lot of magic damage. Now we have one of the last boss fights in the game, Lord Blackburn. Now this guy is pretty hard boss because he's the only boss who has actual resistances. He has 10,800 HP, between 100 to 200 damage, and he has high armor. But the thing is that in Kingdom Rush you can reduce armor with Sorcerer Mage, so how do you beat this guy? Just spam Sorcerer Mages with maybe like a shrapnel shot in between them, and try to keep this guy stalled out. The only thing about him is that he has also quite a few unique passives. Every like third auto attack or so, he's gonna slam the axe to the ground and disable all of your towers. But he's also gonna stun units that are staying close to him, so whenever he does a motion like this, try to move your hero out of the way, and he's not gonna get stunned. That's pretty much it. He also spawns some sort of like skeletons near him whenever a unit dies near him, if I remember correctly. It had a weird gimmick, but it's not that important. You're probably not gonna notice it at all, so get a bunch of Sorcerer Mages, try to keep him in one spot, don't let him get too far, and yeah, whenever he disables your towers, just try your best to keep him in the choke point while the towers are being you know, disabled. Not too difficult of a boss fight, as long as you know what you're doing. Okay, we have actually skipped a couple of enemies, so let's get back into them. Sons of Cerebrus. Now these dudes. I mean, what can I say? They're just a big middle finger from you know, Ironhide. 1500 HP, 50 to 100 damage, medium movement speed, and they have high armor and high magic resistance. You may think that this is like the ultimate Giga enemy, which in a way it kind of is, but honestly, they're not the worst thing to deal with. You only see them on one level, and the best way to deal with them is usually combining Rats of the Forest with high tier artillery tower, and maybe a Sorcerer Mage. That's usually how you beat them. You just have to use one of everything. You can't go only physical or magic damage against these guys. You have to go all in with everything. Honestly, as long as you have good mixed damage with the Sorcerer, you should be able to beat these guys with ease. And last but not least, we have this tank, Cerebrus herself. One of the tankiest bosses in the game. She's not actually the tankiest boss in the Kingdom Rush franchise, it's actually Joku. She has way more HP than Cerebrus, but Cerebrus is, originally, before Kingdom Rush Vengeance, she was the tankiest boss in the game. 21,600 HP, that's a lot. And even though she has a damage number, just like JT, she can insta-kill your units. The only difference is that JT insta-kills units in an area, meanwhile she insta-kills only one unit at a time, so potentially you can perma-stall her, but the problem is that there's a lot of Sons of Cerebrus accompanying her, so it's pretty difficult to stall her forever, but it is definitely possible. But it takes a while, and she's probably gonna get close to your exit by the time you try to do it, so yeah, just use your Rain of Fire on her whenever there's some enemies near her. Don't just Rain of Fire her the moment she spawns, unless you like have really good timing. But yeah, she's not a terrible boss. She's scary though, but she's not the worst. She's definitely not the worst boss that you're ever gonna see. Just use your Rain of Fire on her. Try to stall her out every time you can, even if that means sacrificing a unit. Just don't stall her with your hero, because one mistake and she's gonna kill him, and you're probably gonna lose some lives. And yeah, guys, other than that, that's pretty much every single enemy in Kingdom Rush and how to deal with them. So yeah, if you're a beginner, hopefully this kind of scuffed up guide helped you out a little bit. If not, well, sorry, that's how I do. I'm pretty bad with explanations, so this video was kind of hard for me to do, but I hope that it helped some of the newcomers to the game to kind of understand how to beat these enemies. And hopefully, you know, become better at Kingdom Rush. So yeah, guys, well, with that out of the way, that's gonna do it for today's video. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I appreciate you for sticking around to the end. Subscribe if you want to see more of this content in the future. And while you're at it, drop a like on the video, it means a lot to me. And I will see you in the next video. Until it comes, that was King Rexy, over and out.